Well, we're so grateful to have Kay Warren with us, co-founder of Saddleback Church with her husband Rick. And you know her as an international speaker and a best-selling author. And she is also well known for more than 10 years now as a tireless advocate for those living with mental illness, HIV and AIDS, and the orphan and vulnerable children who have been left behind. She is the author of several books, which we have some offered for sale this weekend. I think they're back there in the corner. Sacred Privilege, Your Life in Ministry as a Pastor's Wife, Choose Joy, Because Happiness Isn't Enough, Dangerous Surrender, and Say Yes to God. And we are so happy to have her with us. She has raised 3 children and 5 grandchildren. She will be speaking again tomorrow. And then on Sunday, she'll be preaching 3 times in this room. And so this is our chance to get to know Kay before she speaks tomorrow, and you're going to hear her heart and passion for her ministry involving mental health. Please give a warm welcome and aloha to Kay Warren. Well, how amazing is this? I have wanted for decades to have you here as for a HIM event, and now you are here. Amazing. And
well, I am so excited. First of all, I find where my feet are going to go. Okay, this is a major problem. Get the feet in the right place. Okay.
Us short people have a hard time with these things.
I know. Okay.
We got to raise this.
But I am honored. When I found out that this was like the first mental health conference in Hawaii, it was like that you invited me. I mean, I'm thrilled. Of course, I wanted to be here. So thank you so much.
Well, you're the
You should applaud
one.
yourselves. You guys are at the very first. Amazing.
Historic. Yeah, and I'm getting pressure, like there has to be a second and third and fourth from Kay. So I actually, you wouldn't have remembered because there were 5,000 people there, but I met you briefly and Rick in London at a leadership conference in 2014 put on by Holy Trinity Brompton, good friends of ours, Nikki and Pippa Gumble. And that's the church that started the Alpha course. So it's wonderful to have you here on stage. So have you been to Hawaii before?
I have. I have been to every island but Lanai and Molokai. Sorry, so I've been to, how many? There's 6. Oh gosh, don't ask me
7.
that. I have been to Maui.
You've been to the majority.
I have been to the Big Island, to Oahu, and Kauai, yes.
Fantastic.
Over my lifetime, and one of my favorite places.
The wonderful thing about Rick Warren, her husband, for many years, he wore an aloha shirt when he preached. So that's amazing.
He was known for his Hawaiian shirts. People brought him, and then it digressed from there, because then it was any colorful shirt. So I was looking through some pictures the other day, and there was one covered with chili peppers, and which was so beneath the dignity of a Hawaiian shirt.
Well,
that was time to retire when he wore the chili peppers.
He's a hot preacher.
Yes, he is.
Most of us know about Kay and her husband. Just to bring us all up up to speed, Kay and her husband started Saddleback Church in Southern California in 1980, which was the same year I began as a pastor. You have all accomplished a bit more than I. And you waited to...
Who says?
You waited for your church to grow to a certain level to build your first permanent building. And you waited till your congregation grew to 10,000, and then you built a sanctuary. Amazing patience in the Lord. That's incredible.
We didn't have the money. We couldn't do it before then.
Oh,
so.
Was that it? Wow, you're part Chinese.
I don't know if it was faith.
And now they have a regular attendance of 22,000 people. So this is like one of their small groups tonight. But this is serious, and I really mean this from the heart. I think for both Pam and me, we have appreciated you and Rick and what you've done at Saddleback, because of you have really built a healthy, genuine, authentic church. And especially when churches get to the mega church level, it can be all about numbers and not about people, but you have always been about people. And you have always had a heart for the entire body of Christ and not siloed off and let's just work on our branding as Saddleback. You've always wanted all the ships in the ocean to rise. And so I really mean that from the heart. I've been so touched by what you all have done at Saddleback. And then Rick wrote Purpose Driven Church in '95, and then he wrote in 2002 Purpose Driven Life, which I'm sure you had a lot of input. And I don't...
No, I can't take any credit for Purpose Driven Life. I cannot. That was him and God sitting in a study for 12 hours a day for about 6 months.
I take
no credit. Yeah, I can't take any credit for that.
But I don't know what the latest figure, but at one time there were 30 million copies sold, and that's incredible. And it's like, depending on what survey you look, it was like number 36 ranked of all time, or another one it was 15, and like the number one would be like, and this is not including the Bible, but it would be like Tale of Two Cities with Charles Dickens, or J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit, or Lord of the Rings. And so you're like up there with these classic people. And 30 million books. My book sold like 5,000, and
mine too.
and
maybe yours sold one or two more than mine. Probably,
well,
I don't know.
But I bought 4,999 of them.
Well, my mother bought mine, so.
It was called How to Pick a Spouse. Pam bought the last copy to make sure she made the right choice.
Did I get one in my gift bag? I just
we
shucks,
could put
I need one in my gift bag.
We should put it. And this is not a joke, but it is a joke. Amazon and Barnes & Noble are now selling my book for 99 cents. Just for this month. They feel so sorry for me. They try to make me a bestseller. So, but then, seriously, you turned your eyes towards the poor in a very significant way, and you all started the Peace Plan. And I think you really focused, at least initially, on the country of Rwanda, didn't you?
Yeah, the country of Rwanda. After Rick wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, someone had met President Kagame, and President Kagame had said the word for his life was purpose. And somebody said, "Oh, well, there's this book you should read. It's called The Purpose-Driven Life." Gave him a copy. He read it, and he wrote to Rick in 2005 and said, "Would you come to Rwanda and talk to us about how to make Rwanda a purpose-driven nation?" Wow. So it was with the invitation of the president that we came and worked with the churches and the government and the three legs of the stool, we call it. And so we've just felt honored to get to know the Rwandan people.
That's amazing. Now, it's been a wonderful ride, has it not? And God has used you, your church, Rick, in a mighty, mighty way. And in the last 5 years or so, you and Rick have more intentionally wanted to help churches, to help those who are mentally ill. And so how did that start?
Well, it started with our youngest son, Matthew. When he was 7, he was diagnosed with depression, and he probably could have been diagnosed sooner if we had understood that children can have mental illnesses. We didn't know. We didn't know that children could have mental illnesses. And we knew he was different. We knew that he wasn't like his older brother and his older sister. He just had a negative mood from almost the beginning, very sensitive to touch and sight and smell. And when we play Candyland, the little kid Candyland game, we had to stop playing it because if he lost, and believe me, I was really easy. I'm not one of those parents that was like, no, you got to earn it, kid. I really did try to let him win as a 2-year-old, but if he lost or whatever, he would throw the game board and be angry for hours over Candyland. And he was different, and he had a negative mood and cried a lot. And so he was 7, he started telling me that he was sad. And we had just moved from one part of the valley where we lived to another part of the valley, and I thought he was sad because we had moved. That made sense to me. But then it didn't go away. He just kept talking about being sad, and I would try to ask him what he was sad about, and he couldn't identify really anything. And I'd say, "Did you have an argument with your friends at school?" "No." Just any question I would ask, he couldn't come up with any reason. And I asked his teachers, and sure enough, his schoolwork was dropping off. He wasn't interested in playing. He wasn't interested in video games. And when he lost interest in video games, that was kind of a clue, because like other little boys, he loved it. And so I remember asking our children's pastor at church, can children get depressed? And she said, yes. And from there, we had him evaluated, and our precious little boy had pretty serious depression. And from there, it just happened. It felt like every few months there was some other diagnosis that was added. He began to develop panic disorders and ADHD, and he was diagnosed with early onset bipolar disorder when he was 11, and he had his first suicidal thoughts when he was 12. I'll never forget the Mother's Day that when he was 12 that I came. It'd been a hard day, and I went to tuck him in at night, and it was dark, and I was just kind of, saying goodnight, tucking him in, and in the darkness, as we just sat there together for a moment, and he asked me if I would kill him and put him out of his misery. And that was devastating to me as a mom. The level of suffering that he was experiencing, I just didn't quite know what to do with that. And then as he got older, it moved to major depressive disorder and borderline personality disorder and OCD and body dysmorphia. I mean, he just suffered. He was under such torture all the time and chronic suicidal thoughts. And then when he was 18 and he stopped taking medication, because at 18, I couldn't force him any longer, and he was an adult in the eyes of the law. And so from there, it was just, he was on, he was off, he was on, he was off. Suicide attempts began happening, hospitalizations, and we lived for the last 5 years of Matthew's life, never knowing if that day would be his last day.
How hard.
And he hit, we say he hit that intractable wall of mental illness, serious mental illness, on April 5th, 2013, and he died by suicide. And it was undoubtedly the worst day of our lives, but we knew immediately that God was asking us to take our story and Matthew's story and somehow use it for healing in our lives and in the lives of many other people. And so we began to really expand the mental health ministry at Saddleback Church, and I do it every day in honor of my Matthew.
When we heard the news here in Hawaii, we were obviously rocked with sadness, and we were so grieved. And the Irish have a saying that when someone passes away, they don't say that they want to share their condolences. They have a saying that says, "We stand with you," and we wanted to stand with you. For our church, actually, just 2 months prior to that, the executive director of our church, he lost his son in the same way as you did. And so to hear what happened to you all, we were right there with you. We were praying for the family. And
thank you so much.
We were so saddened by it all. So as this happened, and of course it took a while to work through all that, and we're always working through all that. How has your church started to form some kind of ministry or focused intention to help people with mental issues?
Yeah. Some of that I'll talk about tomorrow in detail when I talk about what I believe that every church can do for people living with mental illness. But for us, it just became so clear that everything that Dr. Moorhead shared today, and thank you so much, Dan. I love that presentation. Every time I want to stand up and cheer afterwards, because it's not just good, it's powerful and it's compassionate, and so thank you. But we became aware of so much that we didn't know. When in the years that Matthew was so sick, our focus was not on everybody else, their mental illness, or how we could help them. Our focus was surviving. How can we help our son survive one more day? And it was, as he was a young adult, it was his story, and we had to be careful what we said. We couldn't just share with everybody, because partly because Rick is a well-known public figure. We just knew that Matthew didn't need any media attention on him. And so we kept it, our close friends, our family, church knew, but we didn't just make a really big deal. So we had focused on his personal care. And after he died, all of those constraints were gone. It's like, whatever. I mean, his death was a scrolling CNN headline, so there was no privacy. There was no keeping anything hidden or keeping anything secret. It's out there, so what are we going to do about it? Every single church, one of the things I've noticed is sometimes churches will think, well, to talk about mental illness or kind of take that on, we're not a very big church, and we can't really get to that, or we've got to get all these other programs in place, and then we'll maybe think about mental illness. They see it kind of as a boutique ministry item to add to what the church does. And I just feel like that is a misunderstanding. If you heard what Dr. Dan said, mental illness is common, and every single church, from the day you open your doors, you are dealing with mental illness. We might call it pastoral care, we might call it taking care of people, but you're dealing with human beings, and human beings get ill, and they get mental illnesses. And what we wanted to do is to help churches do better what they're already doing. Every church, every ministry is already interacting, because it's either me or it's you. I mean, it's either me or it's somebody I love has a mental illness. So we're already doing it. We just wanted to help people do it better, to be more educated, to be more informed, to be more equipped. And so we've kind of taken that on at Saddleback and see that as one of our missions, is to help the faith community become educated and aware and become places of compassion and acceptance, and a place where everybody feels welcomed and wanted.
You had mentioned once that you once wrote about this, a Facebook message. It was at night, and it clearly indicated to you that so many others were grieving and hurting in different ways. And so how did that discovery come about, and what were some of the things people were saying as they were responding to your Facebook?
Well, I wrote a Facebook post fairly soon after Matthew died. I was not one of those people that used Facebook very often beforehand. I had nothing against it. I just never really used it. But I found after Matthew died that I had all these thoughts. I had all these feelings. I had all these reactions, and I wanted to express them. And I was aware, even really soon after he died, of all the people that started flooding us with calls and letters and emails and texts and Facebook messages telling us that we weren't alone. And not only were they weren't just trying to be comforting, they were saying, we are with you because we are in this same boat. I've either lost someone, or I'm living with the reality that my child or my husband or my wife or I are living with suicidal thoughts, and we don't know what to do, or we live with serious mental illness. And so people were telling us how common this experience was. And so I wanted to say what I was feeling back out into that group, that space. And so I posted a post one night, probably about 6 weeks or so after Matthew died. I was up, I couldn't sleep, I was full of anxiety, I was grieving, I was hurting, and it just hit me. I'll bet you I'm not the only one who's up tonight with grief, with anxiety, with depression, with worry, with fear. And so I posted that and just kind of invited people to tell me their story. And I got like 3 million, people who, 10,000 specific responses and 3 million shares. And so what that said to me was, yes, I am most certainly not the only one who's experienced this. I am not alone being up at night with the things that are worrying me or scaring me or frightening me, or I'm not the only one who's up with grief. And what I've learned from that is, again, how common mental illness is, how common is anxiety, how common depression is, how many of us are living with it on a daily basis and don't often feel like we can go to our church. That was what else I heard. All the people who said, I don't feel like I could go to my church. I don't feel like I could tell anybody there what I'm feeling because somebody would judge me, or somebody would shame me, or somebody would tell me that I just need to pray harder, or memorize a few more verses, or confess a few more sins, or I need to have a demon cast out of me, or it's nonsense and it's not real, and I'm just being a baby, and I'm weak and I'm lazy, and so they said I just keep it to myself. Or we've been asked to leave a church. When I told my Sunday school class that I was feeling depressed, I was asked to leave my church. And there were just all these responses of people sharing their experiences of how they wanted to talk about mental illness at their church and were not allowed to, or were shut down, or even asked to leave. And that lit a fire in me, if you will. Then I'm mad, I'm not just grieving, I'm mad. And it's like, this is not fair, this is not just, this is not right, this is not representing God to the world in the way. Jesus was about suffering. Well, I'll preach all this later, but anyway, the point is, it lit a fire, and I realized that we were not alone, and we had an opportunity to use our grief and our loss and our suffering in a way that might help bring healing to other people who were also feeling those same things.
And as I recall, when that wasn't a blog, but your passage that went out, that there were actually the darker side of church life, or not understanding these difficulties. People were saying unkind things too. Like, I mean,
well,
really,
we don't do grief well. We just don't do grief well. And many times people, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, that they were trying to be kind, that they were trying to comfort us.
Right.
But when they said things like, I know exactly how you feel, my dog died last year.
Ouch.
No, seriously.
Ouch.
Stand, look me in the face, touch my shoulder, get near me with compassion. Say, my dog died last year. I love my dog too, but I'm telling you, it was nothing like when my son killed himself. There was nothing in my universe that had anything to do with the way I felt when my son died. And then there were the people that told me, at least you know where his body is. Those were people who had lost someone maybe in war or in an accident. And terrible things do happen to people's bodies in accidents. And so that was real. But that didn't comfort me. No. And it didn't comfort me when people said, well, at least you had him 27 years. No, I wanted him the rest of my life. Right. I wanted my son here the rest. I wanted to die first. Mothers are supposed to go before their children. And then one of my friends, as I began to ask other grieving parents, do people say stupid things to you too? Am I the only one who's getting these stupid things that people are saying? And she said, oh no, she lost a 6-year-old daughter. And she said, people said to her, at least you can have more children. She's like, no, I don't necessarily want, nobody can replace this child. There are other children, but nobody can replace this child. Or when people who've lost a husband or a wife, a spouse, and well, at least you can get married again. I mean, what is it with us that we think we're comforting people when all we are doing is taking the knife that is already in their hearts and we're twisting it? We are just increasing their suffering. And if you have never lost a child, you don't know what that particular grief is like. And so the safest thing you can say to anyone who is experiencing grief, any grief, the safest, kindest thing you can say is, I am so sorry for your loss. Don't tell them you understand. because you don't. Every grief is unique. You may want to, but you don't. Don't say things like, well, God must have wanted them in heaven. And then you want to go, really? Thanks, God. Then you get mad at God. No, no, no. Or when they say, they're an angel in heaven, or God must have known they had some special work to do in heaven. You just want to throw up all over them because the intent may be good. The worst was when somebody wrote me an email and told me that if we had homeschooled Matthew, and I'm not kidding you, if we had homeschooled him, had never let him play a single video game, if we had never let him watch any TV, and if we had fed him all organic food, and if we had truly lived a purpose-driven life,
that's me.
Matthew wouldn't have killed himself. I am not kidding you. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest, and that one. My first response is I wanted to go, seriously, kick him in the teeth. I'm sorry, I did. I was so angry that someone could say such a thing to us. And then I just started laughing. Because how do you refute that? I mean, how do you even, who sends that kind of a message to a grieving mother? We don't know how to, and it's so much because we just don't know what to do with grief. We don't know how to grieve well. We don't know how to express it. We don't know how to talk to other people who are grieving. So truly, if you need one sentence in your repertoire that will comfort a grieving person, it is this: I am so sorry for your loss. Bingo. You don't have to have a big theological statement. You don't have to have all these great, pithy little statements. Just simply say, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm praying for you.
Do you think part of it is that they just want you, and this is wrong, but just they want you back of how they used to know you?
Sure, there is an element of that. And for us, as with Rick and I, with the leading in our church, they just wanted us to be back. They wanted us to be the old Rick and Kay, the, jolly, great Rick and Kay. And what we had to just finally say is the old Rick and Kay are gone, and they're never coming back. We are forever changed by the death, the horrific death of our son. What we are now two people who are going to have to learn how to live without their right arm. It's as though our right arm was cut off. Can you live without your right arm or your left arm? Sure. You can build a great life if you lose a limb. It takes some time. It takes some relearning. It's not easy, but you can do it. But you never, ever get over the fact that you lost your right arm or your right leg. And so have we and are we learning to rebuild a life and learning how to live again and find joy and to find the goodness of life? Yes. But oh my, we will never stop wishing that Matthew was here, ever, till I see him again.
You had a favorite quote by Eric Liddell.
Yes.
Which kind of leads into, so how does our Christian faith add perspective and strength and encouragement? Do you remember that?
Yeah,
that quote?
Eric Liddell was in the 1924 Munich Olympics, and he ran for Scotland.
Right.
And
Chariots of Fire
they made the
film,
movie
if you
Chariots
saw
of
that.
Fire, da-da-da-da-da. And if you haven't seen the movie, obviously they haven't seen the movie.
Yeah.
These are
You got to see the movie.
really
You
young
gotta see the
people,
movie.
right? Or they just
Yeah.
didn't recognize my version of it. That's probably more like it.
jealous.
Thank you. So he was a runner, and I found this quote very soon after Matthew died, and he said that circumstances may appear to, and now my mind is blanking. Do you have it written down there?
Somewhere probably in this.
Circumstances may appear to wreck our lives. Thank you. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Joy. But God is not helpless among the ruins. And that quote has been powerful to me, just to realize that, yes, that Matthew's death felt like that our lives were wrecked and our lives were ruined, but that God was still working in the ruins, working out his plan of love. And that is probably one of to me, the sweetest messages of hope that I can share. Because as you sit here tonight, something may have happened, or maybe a lot of some things have happened, and it has felt like your life is in ruins. And I can tell you that that God is not helpless in your ruins. He can rebuild and restore, and he does that. And he's done it for us, and I know he'll do it for you. We'll talk about that more on Sunday.
Yeah. And you've talked about how we go through all these stages of grief. And it's not the Kubler-Ross one necessarily,
Right.
but it's the shock and the sadness and the struggle, and then sanctification and service. And you found that to be true, not only for you, but for others that you've become acquainted with in their grieving.
Well, we have this assumption that grief is going to be linear like that. Like if you're familiar with Kubler-Ross's, and it wasn't even about grief, it was about stages of dying, and it's gotten kind of all a little mixed up. But we like to think that grief is orderly and neat, and grief is actually very messy. It's more like an Etch-a-Sketch drawing, with those Etch-a-Sketch, and it's got lines every which way. It's not neat and linear. First you feel this, and then you feel this, and then you feel this. It's more like this swirling vortex of messiness, and you feel this, and you think, okay, I'm done feeling that, and you feel like maybe you're moving into a different season of grief, and then you find yourself back where you just started, and grief is messy, and it is not orderly, and it is not neat and clean. It is the hardest work I've ever done. But in that process, we really have seen how God is using our pain and our suffering and our loss to help other people, kind of as you were mentioning in those, where'd you lose your Perrier? It's here somewhere.
I did.
Excuse me. Mine or...
Quick.
There it
quick.
is. There it is. It's desperate. It's desperate.
This is not a Heineken. It's Perrier. Jesus can change water into... Oh my God, it is a Heineken. No. I'm sorry, I came over your last line.
I don't know. Maybe the next question.
Well, you had said, and this is of a positive note, that depressed Christians have a lot to teach us. What did you mean by that?
Another swig.
I'm not even talking.
Yeah, I have the utmost respect for people who live with severe depression, particularly Christians who live with severe depression, because I think all of us have an expectation that, we all know that life has its ups and downs and hills and valleys, and there's going to be times when you lose a job or someone dies or you have a health crisis. I mean, we all know that pain and sorrow are part of life, and there may be periods in which you experience some depression. But what we don't anticipate is that if that depression doesn't end, and it just keeps going, and it just keeps going, and it just keeps going. And when you're a believer in Jesus Christ, that can really test your faith. I've had some beautiful Christians who live with severe depression who have asked me, how does this fit into my faith? This severe depression, not that they think like they're doing anything wrong or that it's ungodly, they just don't know they don't know what to do with some of their questions, that God is allowing them to suffer continually. And so to me, some of the deepest respect I have is for people for whom faith and life never feel good. And yet they keep on going. They keep on trusting. They keep on believing that there's going to be a better day ahead. They keep on believing that God is using even their severe depression. And so I think that people who live with that chronic deep depression and still trust God are some of the greatest heroes of the faith, far from being weak, far from being at the bottom of the totem pole of greatness in the kingdom of God. I actually believe people who trust God in the middle of circumstances, and particularly depression, that doesn't budge, to be godly people, heroes.
They're some of the most courageous and enduring people.
Yep.
In the context and in the midst of their depression.
I believe that.
So as I asked Dr. Dan, what can churches do?
Well, there's a whole message on that tomorrow. Come at 2 o'clock, I think it is, or 1 o'clock, whatever that last session is, and we'll talk about that in great detail.
Okay.
But let me just say there is something for every church, no matter your size, no matter your demographic, no matter if you're a low-income church or middle-income or mega church. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't take any money to become a compassionate and caring church. caring church for people living with mental illness. So I'll go into real specifics about that
Okay.
tomorrow.
Are you talking about walking tomorrow?
Am I talking about walking tomorrow? Crawl, walk, run?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Super. It's as you look back at your church, with all the new ministry strategies and the sensitivity to mental health that have come about in the last, let's say, 5 years, how have you seen your own church change?
It's slow. I wish I could say that Saddleback is the church that I want it to be, which is that every single person feels welcomed and wanted, and that there's no stigma around mental illness, and that nobody feels like they have to hide their mental illness. And I wish that I could say that our church was a perfect example of that. We are not. But we're getting there. I mean, just this week, I heard an example of someone who shared about her mental illness with somebody else on the staff, and that staff member was quite, created some shame in this other person. And I was like, wait, this was a staff member, not just a congregant who might not have even gotten as much. And she said yes, and it broke my heart. But all it said to me was, our work isn't finished. We have more to do. There's more that we need to explain. There's more that we need to, how we need to educate people. There's more information we need to give. There are more attitudes and prejudices that need to be dislodged. But we're getting there. We talk about it openly from the pulpit. Rick talks about suicide. In fact, y'all, this weekend is it's called the Faith, Hope, Life Weekend. It's a national campaign to encourage congregations to just mention the word suicide in a prayer. Simple. Just as you're doing a prayer in the congregation, just to say, God, we pray for those who are struggling with thoughts of suicide, or those who have been affected by suicide. I mean, just to say that out loud, breaking that taboo, comforts those who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, lets them know they can bring their whole selves to church, and it comforts those who may have been affected by the loss of someone to suicide. Tuesday is World Suicide Prevention Day, so it's in advance of that day where we talk about suicide. Simple things like prayer can make such a big difference in letting people know that you can talk about your mental illness at church, and you're not going to be shamed, and you're not going to be put down.
Well, we have about 100 churches here that could do this this Sunday.
A prayer,
so,
just a simple prayer.
Suggest that to whoever leads prayers in your congregation. And we have a lot of nonprofits here too,
Absolutely.
and that maybe that could be brought up in a board meeting to begin with, and that would be amazing. Now, I made fun of the palette of resources.
I had no
that
idea
we
they
have
sent
there.
that many. What do you know?
Well, it was great. You know, we thought we were getting a couple books, but then.
Don't make me take it back home.
Yeah, so. All right.
Don't make my back hurt. Have me pack it up.
So, do you want to tell us a bit about some of the resources that Saddleback has created? And I think we're providing them, or
Yep, we
giving
have
the opportunity to purchase.
We have, if you're interested in starting a mental health ministry in your church, we have a toolkit. And because we realize that a lot of people have a heart, but they don't really know what to do next. And so it's in a box, and we provided videos of people who are telling their stories about living with mental illness. Has some sermons that Rick and I have preached. It has an entire weekend for students called Anchored for Students, complete with the games, the visuals, the messages, the handouts. So it's got something that's called the Journey Toward Hope that you can get in that kit, or you can get separately. Journey Toward Hope is a support group that you could start. There's the journal itself, and the discussion guide, which is, the guide is free. And am I right, Joy? Is the guide free? Yes, thank you. This is Joy. You should all know Joy. Joy's
I forgot
amazing.
to introduce you, Joy. Sorry, colleague of.
Yes, my colleague.
Okay.
So there's Journey Toward Hope, which is a support group. There's some of the messages that Rick and I preached when we first came back from, we were out of church for 4 months after Matthew died. I mean, we barely left our house to go to the grocery store, let alone go to church. And when we came back, we preached a message series called Getting Through What You're Going Through. And so it's anything that it's, 5 or 6 week series. So there's the Journey Toward Hope, there's the Hope Kit, there's some messages, there's some of the books that I've written.
Someone asked me which of your books talks about the last 5 years. Or...
I have not written since Matthew died. I wrote Choose Joy. Well, I did write, but it's a book for pastors' wives, because I am a pastor's wife. It is what I am. It's what I've been for 43 years. And so it's sort of, it does talk about that, but it's, Joy says that you don't have to be, she says, I'm not married and I'm not a pastor's wife and I love your book. And she's not prejudiced at all. But, so you don't have to be a pastor's wife, because it really does kind of just tell what I believe about God and life. But I have not written a grief book yet. That has mostly been in Facebook posts. It's been too soon.
Right.
I haven't been able, I've tried twice,
and
it's just been too soon to write a book.
Are you ready to take some questions?
Sure.
So if I could have the people with the microphones ready to read about.
I love that your folks that are volunteering are wearing aprons.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, I'm going to guess the significance is just the apron of service that we have as servants of Jesus Christ. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Do you have a mic? You have a mic? Okay. Let's take some questions. And we have 10 minutes or so right here.
My question's real simple about the resources available. Do you have anything specifically geared towards teens and youth groups?
Yes, there is in that toolkit, there is the Anchored for Students weekend. It's an entire weekend, of we did it for both our junior high and our senior high. And so it has the messages that we preach, it has the graphics, the games, the questionnaires, the testimonies. It's a full package for a weekend if you wanted to do something for that. We also, there's a couple of different support groups that I would recommend to you. One of them is it's called the Mental Health Grace Alliance. So it's is it mhga.org? joymhga.org, and they have one for students, and it's called Redefine, and it's specifically a support group for students living with mental illness. We're developing one, but they have one, and it's really good, and I would recommend that. So those are two things I would tell you right off the bat.
One of our 14 electives, Christy Pierce is teaching for youth, specifically about kids who are facing suicidal thoughts. And Christy comes from the Bay Area, where the Palo Alto and all that area have just had a high increase of suicides. So she will be addressing that for that one. Okay, over here.
At 46.4%, that means every other person here has got something going.
Or will in their life.
And how do we recognize, if we should recognize, that they are having struggles, and what can we do about it if we don't experience that we're having struggles?
That is a great question, and Dr. Dan might want to weigh in on that too, but I would just say that organizations like NAMI, that was mentioned, and it's one of the supporters, the National Alliance on Mental Illness.org, is an incredible website, and it is full of information on, like, what are the symptoms, what might you question if somebody was having trouble. You could look down, they'll have lists of ways that you can recognize that somebody might be experiencing a mental illness, and then what to do about it. That's one of the best kept secrets in the world is NAMI and their website. But Dr. Dan, would you like? I mean, really, you're the guy here. You answer that one if you'd like.
And while you're come into the light, Dan. Seriously.
Does he always tell people what to do? Is this
every chance I get?
Yeah.
But I'm just concerned about, but also I should say the president of NAMI Hawaii, I don't know where you are, but you're here and you're giving a talk.
I'm surprised I didn't hear a shout when I said that.
There she is,
Yay,
wearing orange.
Yay, NAMI is fantastic. I cannot tell you enough about it.
Yeah, NAMI's a good thing.
Totally agree. I think I'm kind of an individualist. I'm not big on organizations. I think one of the organizations of the last, say, 75 years is NAMI. Wow. Great work. We are all indebted to NAMI, even though we don't all know it. The only thing I would add about symptoms, and I agree with their website, which is really good. I looked at it recently. Is okay. How do we know the difference between I'm stressed out? How do I know when it's an illness? Well, basically, we all have stress. Stress is part of life. We all have really bad days. When it feels like, well, this isn't really me, I can't do the things that I normally do, this isn't the way I normally think, feel, sleep, eat. When this is not me, or it really seems like it's not the other person, then a question comes up. And sometimes we don't know, or it's hard to tell, and that's okay. But I think if we can remember that stress is normal, but mental illness is when we go past that point when it's not feeling and functioning like normal stress anymore.
Great, thank you. All right. Oh, over there. Oh.
I have a question. On the basis of the church and how we feel spiritually, do you advocate it being having a chronic illness of bipolar or schizophrenia, let's say? Do you advocate taking the drugs that the medical or pharmaceutical or your psychiatrist, or do you advocate taking drugs to get you normal?
Thank you. That's a great question, and people always ask that. And again, Dr. Dan, I'd love to have him weigh in on that. As a non-medical professional, I'll give you my opinion and then let him answer that from the professional point of view. I absolutely believe, as he said, that mental illness is a medical condition. And if I am not at all hesitant to take thyroid medication, my thyroid doesn't work right, and I take thyroid medication, I'll take it for the rest of my life. And I don't have any shame or hesitation. I believe that I've gone to the doctor and been evaluated, and this is what has been recommended. So I will take my thyroid medication the rest of my life. So in general principle, I would say if that has been recommended by a professional, then I would be more inclined to do that in the same way that I would for another illness. Does every mental illness require medication? I'm not sure that that's so, but I think that that's something that you and your doctor talk about together. And I know Dr. Dan will agree with this, that we as whole beings, that all of our health, we need to consider all of our health. And that a pill will not cure everything in our lives, but it can also be very helpful in certain situations.
Did you want to add
Please,
anything?
I really want your professional opinion
Come to
there.
the center.
I feel like I need a
You might as well just stay
feel like
here.
I need a top
Yeah.
hat and a cane here. So I keep
You can
coming.
sit here, and I'll just stand.
Please just stay there. It's fine.
Okay, medications. Best thing I learned in training, one of my supervisors said, medications are for symptoms and not problems. Right? We all have problems. It's normal to have problems. Secondly, with a medication, even if it works well, medications do not take away 100% of symptoms of any mental illness. And I could say the same thing medically for other things, with a few exceptions like thyroid. And so I also agree with Kay that not every mental illness has to be treated with a medication. We have really, really good studies for talk therapies and other kinds of treatments for various mental illnesses. And so I think the word is, well, I don't want to take a medicine. Okay, great. So let's go for it. Let's go for therapy. Let's go for however much you can start exercising. Let's go for social support. Let's go for all this other stuff that we need, versus saying, I don't want to take a medicine, therefore I will ignore this and not do anything. As a psychiatrist, when people come into my office, first they've already been through so much that they'll consider almost anything. But the other part of it is, if they don't want to take a medicine, great. Let's do all the other stuff. Just like if you go into your doctor's office and you have high blood pressure and you say, I really want to work hard on diet and exercise, your doctor will get up and kiss you on the cheek if you say that. They love that. So it's not, medicine, medicine, is it good or bad? It's just one tool that we have to treat mental health conditions.
Great. Yeah, you want to sit up here? No, seriously. I'll be the middle part of the sandwich. You just come on up here. Oh, golly, you're so tall you can just do that. Could you please
just
sit
showing
down
off.
so I can be like, you're still taller than I am. It's a privilege to be a hobbit. This woman over here has been waiting. We'll get to you in a second, and you'll be next. And nobody on this side other than Dean? Okay. Alrighty, go
Would
ahead.
you recommend, I guess, as a component of all recommendations for churches, would you recommend churches liaising with mental health professionals in their local area? For example, having a list of professionals that people could be referred to?
Would you come teach with me tomorrow? Because that is exactly one of the recommendations. I absolutely and wholeheartedly believe in collaboration. I will talk to your pastor. Give me his phone number.
What did you say? What?
She said, would you talk to my pastor? And I said, I will. Go have him call me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's
have
okay.
him come tomorrow.
Yeah, have him come tomorrow. I'll give you my email. Yes, but the answer to that is yes, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
What would you recommend for a mother who's has a child that has severe depression? That's her diagnosis.
Been diagnosed. Please start, and I'll talk as a mother after you talk as a physician and a dad.
So as a parent, in a heartbeat, you would take it on yourself, I know. And yeah, you know, Kay talked about losing your right arm. I know if somebody said to a parent, well, your child can be well, just give up your right arm, they would do it in a heartbeat. So the excruciating thing is we can't do it for people. What we can do is we can be there in a non-pressured way, and we can ask questions in a non-pressured way, and see if people themselves feel like, you know, this is not the normal me, or maybe I'm suffering from depression, and see if they're interested in any of the supports we can offer people for depression. And the only thing I'll say, besides those general things, is oftentimes when people are younger, it's so hard and painful to say, I've got depression, or I need a treatment for mental illness, that they just can't do it. And sometimes that struggle and that grief goes on for years. And during that time, take pressure off yourself from having to get someone to realize it, even though that would be great. And then don't feel pressure to pretend yourself like it's not real or it's not there. So you can be matter of fact, and if it comes up, you can allude to the depression in passing. But you're not going to be in denial. You're going to talk about something as if it's real, but you're not going to talk about it all the time, and you're not going to do it to try to pressure someone, because we know with kids, right? I tell psychiatrists in training, don't use this on your kids at home. This will not work at home, right? There are a lot of things that kids will not take from their parents.
What I would add, just as a mom, is just because, I don't know the age of your daughter, but just because your child is either isn't aware how severe her illness is, or isn't cooperating, or not seeking treatment, or whatever, that doesn't mean that you can't get help for yourself. So many times we, as those who love someone living with a mental illness and cannot control what they do or don't do, or how their ups and downs and valleys are, we cannot necessarily do anything for them in the ways that we would love to. So what we can do is take care of ourselves. And I highly recommend that you are finding support for yourself, that you are working on your own self, that you're finding the comfort, the support. NAMI's a great place. Hopefully some of the churches in Hawaii will start support groups, places where other people, other family members who are just aching for their children or their spouse. So you get help yourself. And secondly, on a spiritual level, is I rounded up a group of people who committed to pray for Matthew confidentially. I didn't have 50 people, but I had a handful of people, and I asked them seriously, would you pray for him? Would you pray for us? And they committed to pray for him on a weekly basis. And I sent prayer updates to them for years. And it was a tremendous source of strength to me, tremendous source of comfort. The things that they wrote back to me, the things that they sent, the verses, all became part of the lifeline that kept me afloat while my son was struggling so deeply.
And I want to add, just as an affirmation for you all, you all are all here because you care and you're courageous. And I just appreciate the questions I'm hearing. That you're here because you want to make a difference, either in your family or in your church. And I can hear some of your concerns, either here formally or offline as we're talking, that you have deep concerns, but you're here because you want help. You're humble enough to know that we're in this together and we all need help. Okay, one more question maybe. Okay, right here. Okay, maybe we'll do two. Okay.
On the other side of the coin, I know that there are clashes with, let's say, mandated reporters start saying things, and all of a sudden the family, because of the stigma, what can be done?
You're a mandated reporter, I'm not.
Well, the main mandated reporting is for kids. So if a kid's in danger, there's a duty to report if you're a mental health professional, and I think most of us would probably support that. The stigma part, to me, it's just become matter of fact, and it's a part of being human. It's not all of them, it's all of us. And so I think we need to be sensitive to people's feelings and sensitive to people's privacy, and there are different reasons why people do want things to be private. And mandated reporting doesn't mean I go out and tell everybody. It's very, very, very limited. So I think we can do it in a way that's respectful and doesn't have to traumatize people or violate their privacy.
I would just add just exactly what Pastor Dan said, is that you all are here, and you are actually the beginning of something changing in the state of Hawaii. What God is doing, and this doesn't feel like a small beginning to me, but in comparison to, could we have thousands of people here? And you'd say, oh, that would be a big beginning. No, what you are here, you are the beginning of things changing in this place. And so it's going to take a long time. This is not a quick fix. Getting rid of stigma, making mental illness an easy topic to talk about. It's common. We talk about the way we talk about our ingrown toenail. That's going to take a while to get there, but that's where we're headed. And the fact that you all are here are evidence that tide is beginning to roll. That is beginning to happen. The train has left the station.
Amen. Okay, last question over there.
Dan, I'm glad you sat down. This is an unanswerable question.
People tell me that all the time.
My father is bipolar, and we're in the midst of his most severe manic episode. It's caused quite a lot of collateral damage and trauma. And how do you treat, when he's manic, he thinks he's fantastic and we're all crazy. His psychiatrist has told him to go back on the medications. He's asked for a second opinion, so he wants to find some other psychiatrist who's going to agree that he's normal. I'm tired of his illness being the excuse for the pain. I'm sorry for those of you suffering with that illness. I'm on the other side of it right now. What advice would you give to loved ones who are suffering alongside of their loved one who is refusing help and being so horrible, vile, nasty? You've heard it, I'm sure.
Yes. So, thank you and bless you for being so open, and everybody who shared openly. A doctor can talk about this stuff till they're blue in the face, and people will not listen and be affected the way they are by sharing like this and by what Kay has done in a very public way. So that's huge in itself. Number two, it was a surprise to me, being trained as a psychiatrist, that even in the psychiatric hospital, there's no excuse for abuse. Mental, physical, sexual, emotional abuse. Sorry, we just don't go along with that under any circumstances. And the hospital's a controlled environment where the nurses and doctors can say, okay, you got to calm down, and then either, we give you a medicine whether you want it or not, or you get to be in a room for a while till you calm down. And we can't always do that, and the rest of life is not a controlled environment. So what do we do? And to me, it reminds me of, sitting with people in these situations. It reminds me of a boat is sinking. And so you're a family member, you have a lifeboat, and you say, come on, get in the lifeboat, come with me, we'll get you to safety. And you beg and you plead and you try to drag them out, and over the person will not let go. They're going to stay on that sinking ship. And we try and we try and we try, and at some point that no one else anywhere can judge, no one outside of you, no doctor, minister, no one can judge the decisions you have to make about family, because no one loves them like you do. But at a certain point, you may say, well, I'm going to drown too. I've got to get out. Please come with me, but I'm getting out now. And that's just what you have to do.
A book, I'm all about books, but there's a good book that you might or might not have read. It's called I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help by Amador. Amador is and it is a really helpful book for exactly the situation that you're talking about. He has a website, he's got videos, I think you'll find some comfort, some encouragement, and some strategies, and everything that Dr. Dan said. And I'll just keep saying this, you have to get help for yourself that help you cope, because you may or may not be able to do anything for your dad. But you can find yourself strong in the situation by getting the help that you need and the support that you need. And I really do recommend that book. It's really good. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that your family is dealing with that.
Well, again, I just want to affirm you all. Thank you for your vulnerability and your desire to get some answers and help and hopefully some form of equipping. And so bless you all.